Hello. I've been asked to talk to you about the economics of immigration, but I'm going to throw in a little religious content, which I think is appropriate given the context. Besides, economics has always been an area of great interest to Jewish law, which is the perspective from which I come. Now, economics and morality intersect in what we now refer to as social action and social justice, which was also of great interest to the rabbis. Morality in the Hebrew Bible, which you call the Old Testament, is primarily about social morality. And this is in contrast to what morality means to many, especially conservative Protestant Christians, where morality is framed almost exclusively in terms of sexual morality. But in Jewish tradition, it's about social morality. It's about how we treat the less privileged in society, the widow, the poor, the orphan, and the stranger. And that's our jumping off point for this. In the Torah alone, the first 5 books of the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, we are admonished 36 times to not to oppress the stranger, to treat the stranger appropriately. And this number 36 is really very important in Jewish tradition. Jewish tradition includes numerology, which is called gematria. In Jewish tradition, every letter in the alphabet is assigned a number. And if you have ever seen literature for a Jewish fundraiser, you've noticed that the giving levels are always in multiples of 18 or 180 or 1,800, depending on the kind of fundraiser. And that's because 18 is one of these very important numbers in Jewish tradition. The word for life is chai, which is made up of 2 letters, the 8th and the 10th in the alphabet, and they add up to 18, and so there's your number. 36 is twice 18, doubly significant. And the rabbis teach us that at any given time in this world, we are supported by the actions of 36 saints, or tzaddikim. These 36 people are there performing good deeds on our behalf and for our benefit, and we owe them, even though they're kept secret from us, we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. So it's no coincidence that the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, says 36 times that we are to treat the stranger appropriately, not to oppress the alien, and so on. Well, here we are, however, in America, a nation of immigrants, and yet we've only recently developed maybe not so recently, developed a very complex and conflicted attitude towards immigrants. Perhaps this is the emotional aftershock of 9/11, perhaps it's a renewed fear of the other, or maybe it's both. The immigration debate is framed in terms of many different issues. It has many different dimensions, from morality to legality to fairness to national security, but also economics. In many ways, we as a modern people need to have a reason for things. And in in public policy, economics is often the reason. Well, what I'm going to do today is to look at the economic support for many of the fairly draconian views on immigration and immigration reform and immigration restrictions that we've seen bounced around in the news and in the public policy debate. So, the first issue is demand-side economics. You probably have heard the phrase supply-side economics back from the Reagan administration. Demand-side economics gets at the issue that when people assert that immigration depresses wages, well, they have in mind a supply-side explanation, a supply-side effect. And they're right as far as that goes. Increasing labor supply does indeed put downward pressure on wages. But the thing is, that argument ignores the reality that there's also a demand-side effect. Immigrants also, in addition to filling jobs, they also buy groceries and auto parts, and they get their haircuts just like anyone else. And what that implies is that there are more jobs as a result of their demand, more jobs in grocery stores and auto parts stores and hair salons and so on. In other words, increasing labor demand from immigration puts upward pressure on wages. So, as a matter of theory, we have 2 countervailing effects on wages. We have the supply-side effect of supply-side effect pressing wages down, and a demand-side effect, the one that people tend to forget, pushing wages back up. And the question is, which one wins? Theoretically, we don't really know. We can't know. However, empirically, there have been various studies that have looked at this and have tried basically to measure the net effect of these 2 effects. And what they found is that they roughly cancel each other out. at least in the long run. There's potential for some short-run negative and positive effects, but in the long run, these things tend to cancel each other out. For example, there's a well-known study from that looked at the 1980 Mariel boat lift of Cuban refugees into Miami, and it found essentially no effect. This was, in a way, a perfect near experiment in the South Florida labor market, and the effect of this influx of immigrants, a dramatic increase in labor supply, led to no increase in wages across the board. It did in certain industries, it did for a certain while, but no long-term increase in wages. In broad outlines, therefore, immigration appears to increase labor demand by about as much as labor supply decreases it. Now, to be sure, there have been some examples of negative effects, downward pressure on wages for low-skilled workers, and that's something that we as a society need to pay attention to. But the bigger issue there is really, what do we do about low-skilled workers? Low-skilled workers are always going to be a little bit vulnerable to this kind of immigration. But even then, the effect is small. And even then, sometimes the effect is positive. For example, there was a study by the University of Nebraska about the county of Lincoln in Nebraska, Lincoln County, Nebraska. Well, in the 1990s, the Latino population of Lincoln County more than doubled. Actually, it increased by a factor of 10 during that decade. But instead of decreasing wages, what immigration did in Lincoln County, Nebraska, was to revive what had been a dying local economy. These folks filled the meatpacking plants and repopulated Main Street. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a retailer or a shop owner on Main Street that isn't happy about this, about the new life that economy has had. And what they've done, more to the point, is they've increased wages. So the basic fact to remember is that supply side and demand side effects work in approximately equal ways, and they approximately counter each other. It is not reasonable to claim, therefore, that immigration or illegal immigration has a systematic and persistent downward effect on wages.